morning, Vincent Revival Center. Thank you guys so much for joining us this morning at 8:30 on our YouTube channel as we talk about God and science here on the Influence. We have absolutely had an incredible discussion over the last several weeks as we explore what the Bible says versus what science says, and then look at those two entities and see if they mirror each other and talk about the controversies that is found within it. So again, thank you this morning for joining us. This is live, so if you would like to jump on the chat there behind the camera, jump on there and let's talk to the guys, ask questions, interact a little bit. If you're watching this live, if not, if you're watching this archive, then you can shoot us an email here at the church and we would be glad to correspond with you. If you have not liked this video, please like it real quick. If you have not subscribed, please subscribe. We're trying to get the subscriptions up every single week, every single month, so that we can continue to influence our culture that we are engaged in. So with that being said, let's jump right into it. This is part 3 of the God and Science teaching. And what we're about to get into is going to be a little bit of what we finished off with last week. So if you are following the series, then the video last Tuesday ended off talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now the reason we're taking a little bit of time talking about the Bible, talking about who wrote the Bible, is because we're trying to prove a point that what the Bible says about things of science, that the Bible said it before the scientists proved it. And that's what we're that's the reason we're taking a little time talking about the accuracy of the Bible. Because if you can see, and if I can prove to you that the Bible was saying scientific things before the scientist was able to prove them in the last century, then it begins to give legitimacy to God's Word and to God who created the heavens and the earth, who lives outside of time. And so if He lives outside of time and He put words in the Bible before the scientists could prove it, then that should begin to allow a little bit of intellectual light bulbs to go off in your mind that there may be truly something to this God that we serve. So let's just jump right into it. We got a couple videos in this session as well. So again, following up from last week, the importance of the Dead Sea Scrolls is the following by way of review. The gap that was between the last prophet Malachi in the Old Testament and the last known manuscript were narrowed from 1,400 years to only about 150 years. Remember last Tuesday. So basically what I'm saying is this right here. Before the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, the last manuscript was 1,400 years after Malachi. 1,400 years. They had a manuscript that was written of the Old Testament. But when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, it took that gap from 1,400 years from Malachi all the way down to 150 years. Which is, from a historical standpoint, from a manuscript standpoint, outstanding, to say the least. The examination of the Dead Sea Scrolls has shown that the Old Testament was transmitted accurately from the 1st century all the way to the 9th century, virtually unchanged. So that gap, that 1,400-year gap, whenever it was shrunk down to 150 years after the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, you were then able to verify that gap of all of the manuscripts that were transcribed the same way. So the manuscript that you found here was the same manuscript that you found here. Absolutely fascinating research. The Dead Sea Scrolls, in the Qumran finding, Gazar says this right here. They cover the whole Hebrew Bible except Esther, and are about 1,000 years older than the most ancient manuscripts that we had prior to that finding. With this newly discovered material at their disposal, experts can now historically retrace the actual steps as to how the Bible took its final shape. Moreover, they are in position to prove that it has remained virtually unchanged for the last 2,000 years. So for the skeptic, that says, hey, you can't trust the Bible because over time things change. You can't trust the Bible because over time parts get lost. No, it did not happen. We can legitimately say for 2,000 years the transmission proved that it did not change from one writing to the next writing. You are dealing with and reading the real thing when you pick up your Bible. Let me give you another example. Norman Geisler, if I'm saying that name right, who was the author of General Intro to the Bible, General Information to the Bible, of the 166 works of Isaiah 53, this is what he says, there are only 17 letters in question. 10 of those letters are simply a matter of spelling, which does not affect the science or affect the sentence. 4 letters are minor stylistic letters such as conjunctions. The remaining 3 letters comprise of the word light, which is added in verse number 11 and does not affect the meaning. Therefore, in one chapter of 166 words, there is only one word, 3 letters in question after thousands of years of transmission from writing it from one manuscript to the next manuscript to the next manuscript. Therefore, it is provable that the Old Testament has been transmitted faithfully for thousands of years intact with no changes at all. Now to the New Testament. The New Testament is the most authenticated book in history. In humankind, in world history. The New Testament is the most authenticated book in terms of proving that it has been transmitted accurately in history over time. When you look at the New Testament compared to other ancient documents that are absolutely simply received as is with no question, watch, and you hold these ancient books up side by side, there is not a single document on earth that compares with the New Testament in terms of the amount of information to be able to study in terms of ancient manuscripts. Let me give you an example. Homer's Iliad, I don't know if I'm saying that exactly right, but Homer's Iliad was written in 800 BC. Of the original manuscript that was written, the original, there are 643 manuscripts or copies of the original that has been transmitted with an accuracy of about 95%. That's very good. Herodotus was written in 480 BC, and there are 8 copies. Plato's was written in 427 BC, and there are 7 copies. Caesar's Gallic Wars was written in 44 BC, and there are 10 copies. The New Testament was written between 50 and 95 AD, and there are over 25,000 copies, manuscripts in Greek and in Latin with an accuracy, when you add them all up and study them all out in terms of what they all say, with an accuracy of 99.5% accuracy and purity with all of those manuscripts. Ladies and gentlemen, that is outstanding. No matter how you slice it, no matter how you cut it, whether you are an atheist or whether you are a believer, the fact that you can get all of these manuscripts, 25,000 of them, and they're 99% accurate, it leaves no question, it leaves no doubt in terms of how pure the transmission has been. There's an archaeologist named William F. Albright, says this right here. It's called Recent Discoveries in the Bible Land. This is what he says. We can already say emphatically that there is no longer any base of dating a New Testament beyond about 80 AD. This is what he means. If you date the New Testament as being truly a first century document, then we know that the time between writing the New Testament and the manuscripts that we have is reliably small, which important in determining that the document we read is reliable and accurate. And he is saying that we can date virtually every book in the New Testament to about 80 AD. Every single one of them. He also says in Christianity Today on January the 18th, 1963, he says, in my opinion, every book in the New Testament was written by baptized Jewish Christian between the 40s and 80s of the 1st century AD. So the New Testament is provable, is not a 2nd or 3rd century fabrication. What he was trying to say in his archaeology finds and in his being able to prove is that some people say that the New Testament was written 100 years after Jesus was died and was raised from the dead, or written in 200 years after the life of Christ. But what he is saying is, no, that's not true. We can prove and trace every letter of the New Testament back to 1st century, right after Christ was resurrected, and it's provable. It's absolutely fascinating. Sir Frederick Kenyon says this: the interval between the dates in the original composition and the earliest existing evidence becomes so small that it becomes ineligible in reference to the New Testament. And the last foundation of any doubt that the Scriptures are reliable and accurate are finally established. You see, many of the men who said their statements are indeed not Christians, but later, after their discoveries, became convinced that the Bible in the New Testament truly was a 1st century book which was transmitted accurately over time. Many of these atheists and agnostics who try to disprove the Bible and then they begin to actually prove the Bible, they become believers. Because if you ask an honest question, then you will receive an honest answer. And if you are asking an honest question and you receive an honest answer, then you have to be open to changing how you believe and how you see. Note what the early church fathers said, those who were disciples of the original disciples in the 2nd century, the 3rd century church leaders. If you look at their writings, you can begin to reconstruct the entire New Testament from their quotes, because they were quoting from their letters. You can almost put together the entire New Testament except for about 11 verses without the actual copies of the books themselves. If every ancient manuscript of the New Testament was lost, watch, we could reconstruct the entire New Testament from the quotations and the writers of people's lives, like Polycarp and those in the 1st and 2nd century who used to write letters back and forth from each other because they would quote Scripture. If you took all of their work, you could recompose the New Testament. The book that you have in your lap, the book that you have at home, the book that you have on your phone, wherever you get it from now, is virtually unchanged from compared to when Paul wrote his 13 epistles, when John wrote his letters, Peter and James wrote their letters in the New Testament. It remains virtually unchanged. Skeptics would say that the Bible is scientifically inaccurate. They say the Bible teaches that the earth is flat. They teach it as if the Bible was not inspired. They teach it as if other people have come and written it other ways. This is why I've tried to spend a little time on this, because when we begin to talk about the science component, what I want you to see is this. In Genesis chapter 1, verse number 1, whenever it talks about in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, what that was signifying is that the earth had an actual beginning. Okay, watch. In the beginning, time created heaven, space, created the earth, matter. Now, the Bible says that in Genesis 1:1. But for thousands of years, you had people, scientists say that the earth had no beginning. Later, they proved that the earth had a beginning. This is my point. You have the origin of time, space, and matter happening at the exact same moment in the very first verse of the Bible. All of it happening. Time, space, matter happening at once. Thousands of years after Moses wrote this, it was discovered that time and space came into existence at the same time. The concept of time Having a beginning is also found in the New Testament in 2 Timothy 1:9 when Paul writes, "Before the world began." You see, there were three British astrophysicists, I'm messing that word up, who proved in the 1960s and the 1970s that time had a beginning. Titus 1:2 uses the word "when the world began." The Bible is very accurate in saying that the world, time, space, and matter had a start date before the scientists proved the fact that the Bible was true. It is this was said before modern science discovered these facts. There's an agnostic, Robert, I can't say his last name, but he said this in 1978, God and the Astronomers. That's the heading right there. He says this, "Now we see how science leans towards a biblical view of how the world was first created." Because they begin to prove that the Bible was true. In 1989, he says this, "Scientists have proven that the universe sprang into existence abruptly." Watch, abruptly. "In a sudden moment of creation, as the Bible said. There is no other holy book that can be discussed in this view." Listen to what I just said. You could look at the Muslims, you could look at the Hindus, you could look at the Buddhists, you could look at any other holy book that is out there, and no other holy book could be viewed or discussed in this viewpoint that we're talking about it. That the idea of time, space, and matter had a beginning. Only the Bible said that. And then science proved that the Bible was right. Because the Bible is the only holy book on earth that teaches a finite universe that has a beginning and a creator who exists outside of that creation. So what we're about to watch now is a video. And this video is a scientific video that explains in very basic terms on how the world began. And basically what he is going to be saying is that they can prove that the universe is expanding out like this. It's a fascinating video. I want you to watch it because it is confirming that Genesis 1:1 is true. Watch this.
If you've been hanging around here long enough, you've learned about plenty of astronomical discoveries that have completely changed the way we think about the universe and our place in it. Like for thousands of years, observers watched the sun and the stars move across the sky, so it was kind of natural for them to assume that the Earth was the center of the universe. And until about 25 years ago, we had no idea that other planets existed outside of our solar system. About 100 years ago, back in the 1910s, astronomers saw something that eventually led to one of the weirdest, mind-blowingest realizations ever made about the universe. And that is that the universe is expanding. In 1912, an astronomer named Vesto Slipher discovered that the light from certain groups of stars, which they'd later figure out were galaxies, was changing on its journey to their telescopes. It was being red-shifted, meaning that the light's wavelength was being shifted toward the part of the spectrum with longer wavelengths. They could tell because certain elements, like hydrogen, emit light in very specific parts of the spectrum, but they were all in the wrong places. For instance, light that left the nearby Andromeda galaxy in the orange part of the spectrum would look ever so slightly redder by the time it got to Earth. That had to mean that as other galaxies were emitting light, they were moving away from us, stretching out their wavelengths. But then, astronomers started measuring the redshifts and distances to lots of galaxies. That's when they discovered something weird. The farther away the galaxy was, the greater the redshift, so the faster it was moving away from us. In 1927, a Belgian astronomer named Georges Lemaitre realized that these changing redshifts could only mean one thing: the universe is expanding. Now, this is commonly misunderstood to mean that everything is flying away from us, or from everything else, which is understandable, but wrong, because the reality is even more complicated, and if you ask me, cooler. Astronomers eventually realized that those red-shifting galaxies weren't speeding away from us through space. Instead, space itself is stretching out. Whoa, right? Astronomers often explain this phenomenon by describing the universe as a balloon covered in polka dots. As the balloon, or space, inflates, the dots, or galaxies, all move away from each other. But because in our example all the parts of the balloon are getting bigger at the same rate, the farther two dots are from each other, the more the distance between them will increase. And the effect looks the same for all the dots, no matter where they are on the balloon. Lemaitre proposed that by measuring how much each galaxy was redshifting based on its distance, we could eventually figure out how quickly the universe was expanding. 2 years later, American astronomer Edwin Hubble, the guy that telescope is named after, studied this some more and put a more accurate, though still not exactly right, number on how fast the universe was expanding. This rate of expansion is called the Hubble constant. Since the day of Hubble and Lemaitre, researchers have discovered that not only is the universe expanding, but its expansion is actually getting faster. The universe is accelerating, thanks to a mysterious force known simply as dark energy. This knowledge has not only explained the weird observations that astronomers started making 100 years ago, it has also taught us a lot about the history of the universe. After all, as Lemaitre realized, once you figure out that the universe is expanding, you can work backward to where it started expanding, otherwise known as the Big Bang. So, thanks to the work done 100 years ago by astronomers who are willing to believe that things that didn't make sense must be true, we've discovered a lot about the universe and its history just by studying our little spot on that giant expanding balloon that is space. Thanks.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that video because it begins to show and prove that the Bible is accurate when it comes to scientific discovery. In the discovery that the universe is expanding, they have discovered that galaxies are moving away from each other, as it was explained, and that space is indeed expanding. Now, if you run the video camera backwards of what you're watching, which means if it is expanding away from a point, then at one time it was all contained down to a point of origin, which means the universe has a beginning. This concept of expanding universe is a 20th century phenomenon, but yet it was spoken and it was inspired in the Bible when Moses wrote it in Genesis 1:1. In fact, Psalms 104 verse 1 and 2 talks about how God stretched out the heavens. He says in Isaiah 42 verse number 5, the prophet said, stretched out the universe. So according to the Bible, God stretched out the universe and expanded it, as he says in Isaiah 45 verse number 12. So the fact that the universe had a beginning and that space, time, and matter had a start date is undisputed in the Bible, because that is who originally said it. The fact that the universe is expanding was also talked about in the Bible, but only discovered in the 20th century. So now I want you to ask yourself this question. If scientists and the philosophers of the day were wrong about the start of the world and of the universe, whenever they would say that the world has no beginning, they used to say this, and then they were all proven wrong by science in the 20th century, even though the Bible was right whenever it was first written. I wonder what else is the scientists getting wrong today? I wonder what other facts that the Bible speaks about today that they would refute, that they're going to be proven wrong as well. Well, one of those, I believe, is evolution. You see, I do not believe that I came from a monkey. I don't. I do not believe that evolution is real. I believe that the Bible is the accurate source of how we were created. And so when God created the heavens and the earth, He created time, space, and matter, that has already been proven. And I believe that the rest of Genesis 1 is also accurate. I believe that when God created man and woman in His image, He created Adam and Eve. And from that creation, we come. We didn't come from evolution. We didn't come from a monkey. We didn't come from a bacteria coming up out of the ocean and climbing up on a rock someplace. I believe none of that stuff. And I believe that just like the scientists were wrong at one time when they would teach people that the earth had no beginning, later they were found out to be wrong, I believe that evolution is also found out to be wrong. So as we begin to close out this particular teaching, I want to end with a fascinating 13-minute documentary of how Ray Comfort confronts atheists about this idea of evolution. And he begins to ask them very direct questions, and you're going to begin to see the holes in their thinking. And I hope that you share this video with everyone. It's fascinating. Check it out.
You're an atheist?
I am definitely an atheist, yes.
Now, why are you an atheist?
Why am I an atheist? Because there is no God.
Atheism assumes that you can disprove the existence of a God. Agnostic is a more correct term, but I'm an atheist.
Are you an atheist?
Yeah.
I am an atheist, yeah.
I am, yes.
I am.
So you're not an atheist?
No, I'm not.
So you're leaning that way because of evolution?
Yeah.
I don't believe in there's a guy in the sky that lives in the sky.
You believe in evolution?
Of course I do, yes.
Live science says of Darwinian evolution, it can turn dinosaurs into birds, apes into humans, and amphibious mammals into whales.
What Darwin showed in his work on evolution and natural selection is that we don't need to invoke any supernatural force or power to account for the development of life through time on Earth.
The ongoing processes that are observable in today's world.
Do you think it's a belief?
I think it's just fact.
I think more like facts. There is too much evidence to ignore.
Do you think it's a belief?
No, it's science.
It's the way it happened.
It's logical.
You know, all the scientists pretty much agree with it. It's more of a fact.
When did you start to believe?
When I started to think for myself.
When did you start believing?
When I took my first biology class.
It all started to make a lot of sense. The teacher made it very, very easy to understand. I generally trust the scientific community. Makes more sense than any religion or anything. The fossils they found of all the cavemen, the Homo sapiens, the dinosaurs, it shows clear evidence.
I believe in science.
What's your major here at this university?
Biology.
Your biology major?
Yeah.
You believe in evolution?
Yes.
What's your major?
Geology.
Chemistry?
Biochemistry.
Environmental science and policy.
I'm a physicist. Biochemistry.
Okay, do you believe in evolution?
Yes, I do.
Do you believe in evolution?
Yes, I do.
Of course.
Yes, I do.
I do believe in evolution.
You believe in evolution?
Yes.
Are you a strong believer?
Yes.
Are you a strong believer?
Yep. Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
A scientific method is based on the collection of data through observation and experimentation. Science Daily.
Could you give me some observable evidence that evolution is true? Something I don't have to receive by faith.
Yeah.
Some observable evidence.
I mean, take a look at what happened 65 million years ago.
Hang on, I can't. That's 65 million years ago.
I believe, millions of years.
So that can't be observed.
We can trace the evolution through the fossil record.
Could you be specific? Just give me one.
Between 6 and 7 million years ago.
Hundreds of thousands to millions of years?
So it's quite a long time.
Yes.
Millions of years.
Yes.
So it can't be observed.
Evolution is not testable over time.
We are condemned to live only for a few decades, and that's too slow, too small a time scale to see evolution going on. Richard Dawkins. We see nothing of these slow changes in progress until the hand of time has marked the lapse of ages. Charles Darwin.
You've got the canine kind, the coyote, and the domestic dog, and there's the feline kind, which is the cats, the tiger and the kitten, and you've got humankind. So Darwin said there'd be a change of kinds over many years. So could you give me one example of observable evidence of a change of kinds?
So, for instance, the fossil record shows the common ancestors of all carnivores, that cats and dogs were once linked, once united by a common ancestor.
How long ago?
This, I believe, was like 60 million years ago.
I don't want something I have to accept by faith. I want it to be observable.
Observable evidence. Well, I mean, if you're just asking me here on the street, there's not really much I can tell you in terms of observable evidence. Like, we would have to really examine existing data to draw conclusions of our own.
I would have to have faith then.
We would have to have some amount of faith.
Can you think of any observable evidence for Darwinian evolution where he said there'd be a change of kinds?
Monkey to man, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, a change of kinds.
I don't really
believe there's any proof for that yet.
Wild monkeys are the only ones with the 5th digit, like we have.
Well, koalas have a 5th digit. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Think we're evolved from koalas?
No.
When I went to like Washington, D.C., I saw they had a whole exhibit just on
In the Smithsonian?
Yeah, in the
Oh,
Smithsonian.
wait, so that is just like some stuffed dummies, like standing around a fire.
I know that everyone talks about the missing link for humans and whatnot. I believe that there are connections that are out there that we haven't found yet.
I'm going to trust what those experts did. Those experts came up with.
I have a strong trust in evolutionary ideas based on the evidence presented.
Can you think of any observable evidence for Darwinian evolution, a change of kinds?
I haven't seen it myself, but I believe what the textbooks tell me about it, so.
You've got faith in the experts?
I have faith in the experts, yeah. I guess similar to how religious people have faith that God actually exists, I have faith in the experts knowing what they're talking about.
The scientific method must be observable and repeatable. So could you give me one piece of observable evidence for Darwinian evolution?
Okay, I would point to, as one great example is look at the genetics of the stickleback.
What's that?
So stickleback fish are a very interesting collection of species that were recently isolated after the end of the Ice Age.
What did they become?
They're various species of sticklebacks.
They stayed as fish?
Well, of course.
Can you think of any observable evidence where there was a change of kinds?
Fish.
Human beings are still fish.
Human beings are fish?
Why, yes, of course they are.
How long did that take?
A couple billions of years, millions.
A couple of millions? How is that observable?
It's not.
We came out of the ground as a mammal, and one mammal created...
Come out of the ground? Didn't we come out of the sea?
Huh? Well, initially in the beginning, we came out of the ground and the sea. After the great destruction of the...
So did we have lungs or gills when we came out of the sea?
You want to know something? Those that were in the sea, I guess, had gills, and those that were on land had lungs.
But if we came out of the sea, we had gills in the sea.
You want to know something? Who knows that we came out of the sea or we evolved from mammals?
So you don't know?
Huh? Of course I don't know.
I'm accepting that they did their science correctly.
Could you give me an example of Darwinian evolution, not adaptation or speciation, but a change of kinds?
These are changes of kinds.
They're still fish.
They're distinctly different fish.
We have thousands of examples.
Can you give me one?
I can give you thousands.
Just one.
For instance, I would say look at Lenski's experiments with bacteria then.
So what do the bacteria become?
The bacteria are still bacteria, of course.
So that's not Darwinian evolution. That's not a change of kinds, is it?
It is a change. It is a change in the genetic makeup of the bacteria, which is
still bacteria. So what do the bacteria become?
A new kind of bacterium.
So it's still bacteria. There's no change of kinds. To summarize, the observable evidence that you give me for Darwinian evolution is bacteria becoming bacteria.
No, it is bacteria acquiring new metabolic capabilities.
You said before that there is lots of evidence for evolution. I just want one observable evidence for Darwinian evolution, just one.
But I gave you some. You don't want...
Not some, I want one.
Wait, you don't want that.
I want one. Yes, I do. I'm pleading with people.
You asked me to tell you when I've watched one species evolve into another. Isn't that right?
No, one kind into another. There's 14 different definitions of species. So I want a change of kind.
When you're talking about kinds or change in families, you're actually talking about macroevolution. You're talking about changes on the level that separate, say, cats from dogs.
So could you give me any examples of Darwinian evolution?
Well, when you say examples of that, then you have to sort of look at over a longer time frame.
It has nothing to do with faith. Faith is something that I have to, unseen, I have to believe in.
That's it, unseen. Look, do you believe evolution?
Of course I do.
Are you a believer in evolution?
Yes, I am.
When did you start to believe evolution?
I started to believe evolution when I started to think out for myself.
Is evolution a belief?
Well, you know something? Evolution is a thought process. Is coming to terms and checking out all the alternatives, like taking a look at the religion, man-made religions.
Let me ask you again: is evolution a belief?
No, evolution is, well, yeah. In a word, yeah, I could say it could be a belief.
When you say change of kinds, you mean the evolution of one species from another or to another? Yes, we have that in action actually in the Galapagos.
Could you give me one instance?
Yes, we have an example from a group of birds called Darwin's finches.
You take a look at the difference between the finches on the islands that all started out. I mean, that's very, very observable.
But that's not Darwinian evolution. There's been no change of kinds. What do the finches become?
They become genetically new and anatomically new, recognizably different species.
So they're still finches?
Well, of course they're still finches, yes.
So they're not a change of, there's no change of kind.
Little birds that he had observed that...
What did they become?
Their beak shapes.
They're still birds?
Yes.
3 finches that turn into different types of birds.
They're still finches?
Well, for example, Darwin and his study on evolution of the birds on the island that he went on to there.
Their beaks changed?
Their beaks.
They're still birds. There's no change of kinds. That's within the kind.
Just evolution on the beaks.
So that's called adaptation. It's not Darwinian evolution. There's no change of kinds. There's no different animal involved. I want something that shows me Darwin's belief in a change of kinds is scientific. Darwin spoke of a change of kind. Can you think of any observable evidence for Darwinian evolution where there's a change of kind?
Change of kind. Change of kind. I'm gonna have to think about that one a little longer.
You give me anything that I can see, observe, and test, which is a scientific method for Darwinian evolution, a change of kinds.
Test and observe.
Could you give me observable evidence, which is a scientific method for Darwinian evolution, a change of kinds?
I gotta think about it. So you want the evidence of it?
I would say I cannot, I think. It's a hard question, actually. Mitochondrial DNA. So, can you repeat the question again?
Could you give me any observable evidence, just one, for Darwinian evolution?
Let me think about that for a sec.
Observable evidence, something where we don't have to exercise faith. Something that can be observed, like the scientific process, observable?
That's a good question. That one I'm not quite sure.
So you can't think of any observable evidence for evolution?
No.
How do you know it's true?
I'm not sure.
So Darwinian evolution is not observable, it's not scientific.
I guess so.
So it's unscientific, you can't prove it.
It's scientific, actually. You could prove it. It could be proven, just...
Do it for me.
That's hard. That's just too broad of a...
It's unobservable, that's why you need millions of years.
Yes, exactly.
You're trusting the biology majors and the biology professors know what they're talking about, and they can't even give me evidence of a change of kinds.
Well, then there isn't one. If they don't give it, then I wouldn't say there was.
Yeah. I just go on what I've seen and what I've learned from class.
So you believe?
Yeah.
You know what that's called?
What?
Blind faith.
Blind faith.
You're an atheist?
I am definitely an atheist, yes.
Now, why are you an atheist?
Why am I an atheist?
We close out this particular teaching of God and Science Part 3. Brother Devin's going to close us out by putting in perspective of what the Bible says about how things were created, whether it was evolution or whether it was the creation of the world, and how you can take the Bible and have a legitimate conversation in the scientific world based upon what is said in it versus other historical, ancient
creation myths.
Creation myths that is found throughout world history, and you cannot have a legitimate conversation about these other ancient creation myths found in world history like you can with the Bible. I just want Brother Devin to come and share and kind of close this teaching out about this topic.
Yeah, so, like Pastor Jason was saying, is that the Bible approaches creation way different than some of the nations around them. So one of the big ones that I'll just highlight one, because, there are obviously lots of them, but one of them was Babylon. And of course, that's obviously very familiar to you that know the Old Testament. The Babylonians came and attacked Israel, brought people into captivity, all that. So we know that this was obviously a very close in proximity to Israel. They were very powerful, so their religion would be pervasive. People would know it. And their creation myth. So they had this idea that there were these two gods. One was Marduk. One was Tiamat, and basically Tiamat was this chaos and all of this. And interestingly enough, I know this is a big rabbit trail and we could probably do a whole topic on this, but there was this idea of Tiamat being represented as chaos and being represented as the waters. Well, interestingly enough, you see some of that idea actually in the Hebrew of the Bible. So one thing I will say about about Genesis and the creation is that a lot of it was actually a polemic against some of these mythologies. So you'll see kind of some references like that of oh, this is what was happening, but really it wasn't Marduk doing what he did, it was God just speaking and the chaos was gone, right? So there was all these creation myths and all these, and their idea was that Marduk basically blew Tiamat in half, took one half and made the heavens and one half and made the earth, and that's how the world was created. And so you see that, and you see that's very different from what we see in Genesis, where we have this beginning where God isn't, it's not that the world is made out of God, it's not like there was this lesser God that God blew up and made and formed him into the earth or whatever. It's that God spoke, and at this definitive beginning, the world came into creation, that you see these kinds and things like that. So obviously when you look at that, you see that in a similar time period, in a similar nation, at a similar part of the world, you have a very different type of teaching on how the world was created. And so I think that's really important to see just the uniqueness, and also the fact that if you really deep dive into this, if you go way down the rabbit trail of the Hebrew and looking at what they call ancient Near Eastern mythology, you will see that the Bible in and of itself is speaking against these other creation myths. It's almost like saying, hey, this is what you think, but this is how it really happened. And so, when you look at it and then flesh it out, like Pastor Jason said, that you see that just when you take the aspect of there was a beginning, that is confirmed, and you don't see that in any other myth.
It's fascinating. Thank you guys so very much. We're going to end it right there. We're going to pick it up with part 4 next Tuesday, right here on the Revival Center YouTube channel. This is our Influence. Thank you so much for joining us. Like the video, subscribe, share it with somebody, have a discussion, and hit us up on chat or send us an email. We would love to hear from you. Thank you guys so very much. Thank you, Brother Devin, for closing us out. God bless you. We'll see you next Tuesday.